I'm Kyle Eidelman. I'm a pastor at Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm also an author. The first book that I wrote was a book called Not a Fan, and really it was a very personal journey for me that I didn't want to share with other people, but as the saying goes, what God does in you, He often wants to do through you. And that was true for Not a Fan. The End of Me is kind of a follow-up to Not a Fan in many ways, because it takes a fresh look at some of the familiar teachings of Christ, and it turns some things upside down for us. Maybe some things that we thought we understood, it allows us to look at it through a fresh lens. For example, Jesus says that the first will be last and the last will be first. Well, that's not really how we think of it. We think, the first are first and the last are last. Jesus says if you humble yourself, that you'll be exalted. But we don't tend to think that way. We think that the way that we're going to be exalted is if we're in the spotlight, if we're on the stage. And so at first you read it and you wonder, is that true? But then as you live it out, you see how Jesus, the one who knows us, the one who created us, how what He says is right, even if it doesn't feel right. So much of the teaching of Christ was not just countercultural, but it was counterintuitive. Just this idea that we find life by giving of ourselves. What we discover in The End of Me is that that's where we find life, at the end of ourselves. But Jesus says that we will find our lives when we lose our lives, that at the end of ourselves is where we find real life in Him.